The officer didn't know my name when I pulled him from the car. I didn't know his either. All I knew was that my daughter was watching from the sidewalk, her hands pressed against her jacket, her eyes locked on the blood pooling under the door. I knew that if I hesitated, the man inside wouldn't make it. And I knew that stepping forward would change something I wouldn't be able to undo. People talk about instinct, like it's clean, like it's simple. It isn't. I made a choice in the middle of broken glass and sirens. I saved his life. What followed cost me more than I expected, and it changed how the department looked at me, and how I looked at myself. If you value slow, honest stories about choice and consequence, consider subscribing. These stories only work if they're given time. The sound reached me first. Not the sirens, the metal. It was the scrape of a car sliding where it shouldn't, followed by a short, heavy impact, not loud enough to draw a crowd, loud enough to make people stop walking. I was holding my daughter's hand. We had just left the grocery store, one bag in my left hand, her fingers wrapped around my right. She was talking about something from school. I don't remember what. I remember nodding. I remember thinking about dinner, about how late it was getting. Then everything shifted a few feet to the left. The patrol car was angled wrong, nose pressed into a light pole. The engine was still running. One headlight flickered. The other stayed dark. There was no smoke. No fire. Just a quiet that didn't belong there. People stood back. They always do at first. Someone raised a phone. Someone else swore under their breath. I stopped because my daughter stopped. Her grip tightened. Not hard. Just enough to tell me she'd seen it too. The officer was still inside. I could see him through the window. His head leaned forward, chin near his chest. One arm rested against the door like it had fallen there by mistake. The door wouldn't open. A woman near me said something about calling 911. Another voice answered that they already had. Sirens were coming. They were always coming. I set the grocery bag down. Eggs rolled against the plastic. I didn't look back to see if they cracked. I told my daughter to stay where she was. She didn't answer. She was watching the car. Her eyes moved from the broken light to the dark stain spreading under the door. The officer made a sound. Not a word. Just breath trying to be something else. I stepped closer. The heat from the engine hit my face. I smelled oil. Burned rubber. The window was intact but spittered. Fine cracks running outward from a point near his shoulder. I knocked. Once, harder than I meant to. His eyes lifted. They didn't focus right away. When they did, they didn't settle on me. They passed over my face like they were searching for something behind it. I told him help was coming. I don't know why I said that. It felt like something you're supposed to say. His mouth moved. Nothing came out. I pulled on the door handle. It didn't budge. Someone shouted for me to get back, that the car could catch fire, that the professionals were on the way. I looked back at my daughter. She hadn't moved. Her hands were pressed together now, fingers laced tight. Her face was still. Too still for her age. She wasn't crying. She was watching me. That was the moment everything narrowed. Not the blood, not the uniform. Her. I could hear the sirens now. Far, but real. Time stretched in that strange way it does, when you're waiting for something you can't control. Every second felt counted, used up as soon as it passed. The officer slumped further forward. His forehead touched the glass. I hit the window with my elbow. It hurt more than I expected. The glass held. I backed up half a step and struck again. The crack spread but didn't give. My elbow throbbed. My arm went numb from the impact. A man ran up beside me. He said he had a tire iron in his trunk. He took off before I answered. I struck the window again. This time the glass gave way, collapsing inward with a sharp sound that cut through everything else. The officer flinched. His head jerked up. Blood ran from his temple down his cheek. Fresh. Brighter than before. I reached in, careful of the edges. My hand shook. I told myself to slow down. That shaking only made things worse. The seatbelt was jammed. I cut it with my keys, sawing until it gave. His weight shifted suddenly. He sagged forward and I caught him against my shoulder. He was heavier than I expected. Dead weight, not helping. I felt the warmth of him through my jacket. I felt his breath, shallow and uneven, against my neck. I dragged him out inch by inch, bracing my feet against the pavement. Glass crunched under my shoes. The smell of blood was sharp and close. When we were clear of the car, I lowered him to the ground. My knees hit hard. I didn't feel it. He looked at me then, really looked. His lips moved. He said something. I didn't hear it over the sirens, now close enough to shake the air. I stayed with him until the first cruiser pulled up. Then another. Then an ambulance. Hands replaced mine. Voices took over. Someone asked my name. I told them. Someone else told me to step back. I stood up slowly. My legs felt unsteady, like they didn't trust me anymore. My daughter ran to me. She wrapped her arms around my waist and pressed her face into my jacket. Blood smeared onto her sleeve. I didn't notice until later. I looked at the officer once more as they lifted him onto the stretcher. He was alive. That was all I knew for sure, and even then it didn't feel like the end of anything. It felt like the start of a long, quiet stretch where nothing would be simple again. The next morning started the way it always did. The alarm went off at 6. I shut it off before it rang twice. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of traffic far below. The city waking up without asking anyone's permission. I stood at the sink and washed my hands longer than usual. There was still dried blood under one fingernail. I worked at it with a brush until the skin around it turned pink. I watched the water carry it away. It didn't change how my arm felt. Heavy. Sore in places I didn't remember using. My daughter was already awake. She sat at the table with her homework spread out, pencil moving slow. She looked up when I entered the kitchen. Her eyes went to my elbow, wrapped in a loose bandage, then back to her paper. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "A little," I said. She nodded and went back to writing. That was her way. Ask once. Accept the answer. I made eggs. Burned the first batch. Threw them out without saying anything. The second batch came out fine. Toast popped up too dark on one side. I scraped it with a knife. We ate in the same spots we always did. She drank her milk in small sips. I checked the time between bites. Nothing in the room had moved. Nothing looked different. But everything felt louder. When we left the apartment, I locked the door twice. I don't remember unlocking it the second time. The hallway smelled like old carpet and cleaning spray. Mrs. Alvarez from down the hall passed us, pushing her cart of laundry. She smiled like she always did. I smiled back. Neither of us mentioned the sirens from the night before. Outside, the sidewalk was busy. People stepping around each other. Cars idling at the light. A normal morning. We walked the same route to school. I held my daughter's hand until we reached the corner. She let go there, as she always did. Older kids don't like to be seen holding hands. At the gate, she stopped. Looked up at me. "Are they going to talk to you?" she asked. "Who?" "The police," she said. "I don't know," I said. It was the truth. She considered that. Then she leaned forward and hugged me, quick and tight. Before I could say anything, she pulled away and joined her friends. I watched her disappear into the building. The bell rang. The doors closed. I stood there a few seconds longer than usual. Then I turned back toward work. My job was 3 bus stops away. I rode standing up, holding the pole with my left hand. My right arm ached when the bus lurched. I kept it close to my side. At work, no one mentioned anything at first. The office smelled like coffee and printer ink. Screens glowed. Phones rang. I sat at my desk and logged in. Around mid-morning, my supervisor stopped by. He leaned against the edge of my desk and asked how my arm was. "You heard?" I said. He nodded. "It's all over the local news." He said it like that explained everything. I pulled it up on my phone during lunch. A short clip. Shaky footage. Someone had filmed the rescue from across the street. You could see my back. My jacket. The moment the window gave way, they didn't use my name. Just a bystander. I closed the video before it finished. When I picked my daughter up that afternoon, two parents watched me longer than usual. One of them said, "Thank you." I nodded. Another asked if the officer was okay. I said I thought so. No one asked how I was. That night after dinner, I took the trash out. The bag was heavier than it should have been. I felt it pull at my shoulder. I adjusted my grip and kept going. Down by the bins, a police cruiser rolled past slow. Too slow for traffic. The officer inside glanced at me, then looked away. I stood there with the trash bag in my hand until the cruiser turned the corner. Inside, my daughter was brushing her teeth. She spit, rinsed, wiped her mouth. All the steps in order. When she crawled into bed, she hesitated. "Dad?" she said. "Yeah?" "You did the right thing," she said. I didn't answer right away. I sat on the edge of the bed and smoothed the blanket over her shoulder. "I hope so," I said. She closed her eyes. Breathing evened out. Sleep came quick. I stayed there a while longer, listening to it. In the quiet, I realized how carefully my life had been built, how much it depended on days passing without interruption. That night showed me how thin that balance was, and how once it tipped, it didn't tip back on its own. I turned off the light and closed the door. The hallway felt longer than it had before. I noticed the uniforms more after that. They had always been there. On corners. In doorways. Parked along the curb with engines running. Before, they blended into the city the way streetlights did. Sixth. Expected. Not personal. Now they stood out. Two officers were posted outside the school for the rest of the week. Same pair every morning. They nodded at parents. Talked quietly to each other. Their radios crackled now and then. When I walked past, one of them looked at me a moment longer than the other. Not unfriendly. Just focused. On the third day, one of them stopped me. "Sir," he said, "can I get a word?" I told my daughter to go ahead. She hesitated, then followed the flow of kids through the gate. The officer asked for my name. I gave it. He wrote it down, even though I was pretty sure he already had it. "We may need a statement," he said. "Just routine." I nodded. Routine was a word I understood. He didn't ask me for it then, just told me someone would reach out. He thanked me again. His partner stood a few feet back, watching traffic. When they stepped aside, I walked on. My chest felt tight in a way I couldn't explain. Not fear, not pride. Something closer to being measured. At work, a few more people had questions. Not about the rescue itself, but about what happened after. What the officer said, how long it took for help to arrive, whether anyone else was involved. I answered what I could. When I didn't know, I said so. Around Friday, a detective called. He asked if we could meet the following week. At the precinct. I agreed. The building was older than it looked from the outside. Inside, the air was stale. Paper and disinfectant. Voices echoed down the hall and flattened into something dull. The detective met me in the lobby. He was polite, careful. He shook my hand and led me to a small room with a table and two chairs. A recorder sat between us. He asked me to walk through everything again. Where I was standing. What I saw. What I touched. When. I told him. I kept my voice even. I didn't add anything extra. When I finished, he paused the recorder. "You did a good thing," he said. I waited for more. It didn't come. He thanked me again and walked me out. At the door, he hesitated. "You understand we have procedures," he said. "We need to be thorough." "I understand," I said. Outside, the sky had darkened. Rain threatened but didn't fall. I stood on the steps a moment, then headed for the bus. That weekend, the officer I'd pulled from the car was named in the paper. Condition upgraded. Family by his side. The department released a statement praising swift civilian action. No one called me. On Monday, I noticed my access badge at work didn't open the side door like it used to. I went around front instead. Security waved me through without comment. At the grocery store, a patrol car idled near the entrance. When I came out with my bags, it was gone. I told myself it was coincidence. Cities are full of patterns that mean nothing if you look at them long enough. But the feeling stayed. One afternoon, as I waited for my daughter outside school, another parent asked if it was scary. "What?" I said. "Being that close," she said, "to dying." I thought about it. The weight of the officer, the heat of the engine, the sound the glass made when it broke. "Yes," I said. She nodded like that was what she expected. Then she changed the subject. Later that week, I saw the detective again, this time at a distance. He was talking to one of the officers near the school. When he noticed me, he gave a small nod. Nothing more. I nodded back. The space between us felt deliberate. At night, after my daughter was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and sorted the mail. Bills, flyers, a letter from the department thanking me for my assistance. No signature, just a printed name at the bottom. I folded it and set it aside. What struck me most wasn't the distance itself. It was how carefully it was maintained. No doors slammed, no words raised. Just an invisible line that I hadn't known was there before. I had crossed it without meaning to. And now that I saw it, I couldn't stop seeing where it ran. The first time I saw the footage again, it was without sound. It was playing on a television mounted in the corner of a diner. I was waiting for a takeout order after work. The screen showed the street from across the way. The patrol car angled wrong. Me stepping forward. Me disappearing into the frame. No context. No noise. Just movement. The woman at the counter glanced at the screen and then at me. She didn't say anything, neither did I. I took the bag when my name was called and left. That night, I replayed the moment in my head the way people do when they can't sleep. Not the whole thing, just pieces. My elbow hitting the glass, the way my breath caught when it finally broke, the sound my daughter made when she saw the blood. I hadn't let myself think about that part. The following afternoon, a uniformed officer knocked on my door. I saw him through the peephole and felt something tighten in my chest before I unlocked it. He introduced himself. Said he just needed to ask a few clarifying questions. Nothing new. Just consistency. I let him in. He didn't sit. He stood near the doorway, notebook in hand. "Did you touch anything inside the vehicle besides the seat belt?" he asked. "I don't think so," I said. "Think or know." I paused. I pictured the inside of the car again. The cracked glass, the steering wheel slick with blood. "I know," I said. He wrote something down. "Did the officer say anything to you?" He tried. "Did you hear it?" "No." He nodded. Closed the notebook. "Thank you for your time," he said. Before he left, he glanced down the hallway toward my daughter's room. "She was there," he said. Not a question. "Yes," I said. He didn't comment on that. Just nodded once more and left. After the door closed, I leaned my forehead against it for a moment. The wood was cool, solid. That evening, my daughter drew a picture at the table while I cooked. Crayons spread everywhere. She pressed hard with the red one, coloring in thick lines. "What are you drawing?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Finally, she turned the paper toward me. It was the car. Crooked, the light pole. Stick figures standing nearby. "You," she said, pointing. "Me." Another figure, smaller. The officer was there too, lying down. I nodded. That's what happened. She studied my face like she was checking something. "He looked scared," she said. "Yes," I said. "So did you," she said. I went back to the stove. The pan was too hot. Oil smoked. I turned the burner down. Later, when she was asleep, I folded the drawing and put it in the drawer with important papers. Birth certificate, insurance cards, things I didn't want to lose. The next call came from the department the following week. A request to come in again. This time, they said, for closure. The room was the same. The table, the chairs, the recorder. 2 people this time. The detective and someone from internal review. She introduced herself and smiled, but her eyes didn't soften. They asked the same questions again. Then new ones. Why did I decide to intervene? Why didn't I wait for emergency services? Did anyone encourage me? I answered carefully. I chose words that stayed close to the facts. I didn't think he had time, I said. The woman from review tilted her head slightly. And you're not trained, she said. No, I said. Do you understand that intervening can complicate investigations? She asked. Yes, I said. She wrote something down. The detective cleared his throat. But you likely saved his life, he said. The woman didn't look up. We're not disputing outcome, she said. We're discussing process. When it was over, they thanked me again. Stood. Shook my hand. Outside, I sat on the steps longer than last time. The sky was clear. The city moved around me. I realized then that the rescue wasn't over. Not really. The act itself had taken minutes. The aftermath was stretching out, slow and careful, like something being examined under bright light. Every question felt like a hand turning it slightly, looking for a flaw. That night, my daughter asked if the man was going to be okay. I think so, I said. Are you? She asked. I looked at her. Really looked. I don't know yet, I said. She accepted that. She always did. But as I lay awake later, staring at the ceiling, I understood something I hadn't before. Saving him had been simple. Living with it was going to be harder. The changes didn't arrive all at once. They came in small adjustments, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. The first was a letter from the department. Another one. This one thicker, official. It thanked me again for my cooperation and informed me that the investigation was ongoing. No action required on my part, no timeline. I set it on the counter and left it there for days. At work, my supervisor stopped asking how my arm was. He stopped stopping by altogether. When I needed approval for something that used to take a few minutes, it took a few days. No one said no. They just didn't say yes right away. I told myself it had nothing to do with the accident. At the school, the officers were gone, not replaced, just gone. Parents noticed. Someone asked if I knew why. I said I didn't. One afternoon, a different cruiser idled near the corner when I picked my daughter up. The officer inside watched the crosswalk, not me. Still, I felt the weight of it. That night, my daughter asked why the police didn't come anymore. I don't know, I said. She thought about that. They were nice, she said. Yes, I said. She didn't push further. A week later, the detective called again. He said they needed one more thing, just a formality. I asked what it was. He said it would be easier to explain in person. At the precinct, they led me to a different room. Smaller. No recorder this time, just papers. The woman from internal review was there again. She slid a document across the table. It stated that while my actions were not being considered criminal, they had deviated from recommended civilian conduct during emergency response. The department was closing the matter. No further contact would be required. There was a place for my signature. Acknowledgement only. I read it twice. Do I need a lawyer? I asked. She looked at me for a moment before answering. That's your choice, she said. But this isn't an accusation. I signed. When I stood to leave, the detective didn't meet my eyes. Outside, the building felt heavier than before, like it had settled into itself. That evening, I stopped by the store on the way home. Same aisles, same fluorescent lights. As I reached for a carton of milk, it slipped from my hand and burst on the floor. White spread fast, pooling around my shoes. An employee came over with a mop. He said it was fine, that it happened all the time. I stood there longer than necessary, watching him clean it up. At home, my daughter was quieter than usual. She did her homework without complaint, ate her dinner slowly. When it was time for bed, she asked if I could read to her. She hadn't asked that in months. I sat beside her and read until my voice went hoarse. She listened with her eyes closed. Halfway through, she reached out and held my wrist. Not tight, just there. I stayed until she fell asleep. Later, alone in the kitchen, I noticed how silent the apartment felt. No sirens, no distant shouting, just the refrigerator cycling on and off. The silence pressed in. Not peaceful, watchful. The next morning, an email waited in my inbox at work. A brief note informing me that my position was being reassigned. Same pay, different responsibilities, less client-facing, more internal tasks. No explanation. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. When I picked my daughter up that afternoon, she asked if I was tired. Yes, I said. She nodded. Me too. We walked home slower than usual. The sun was low. Shadows stretched long across the sidewalk. As we passed the corner where it had happened, she stopped. They fixed it, she said. The light pole had been replaced. The sidewalk cleaned. No glass. No stain. Yes, I said. She looked around, then back at me. It doesn't look like anything happened, she said. No, I said. It doesn't. We stood there a moment longer. Then she took my hand and we kept walking. That was when I understood the real consequence. Not the letters, not the meetings, not the reassignment. It was the way everything moved on so carefully. As if the event had been smoothed out, pressed flat, made safe. Except for us. We carried it quietly. And no one else seemed to want it. The shift didn't announce itself. There was no clear moment when I could say it happened. It showed up in small choices. I stopped checking the news in the morning. The stories about the officer faded anyway. New incidents replaced the old ones. Different names, different streets, the same language. At work, I kept my head down. Did what was asked. Didn't volunteer ideas the way I used to. When meetings ended, I left right away. I stopped eating lunch with the others. No one mentioned it. At home, my daughter noticed before I did. One evening, I was standing at the sink washing dishes. She was at the table, cutting paper for a school project. She watched me for a while, without speaking. You don't hum anymore, she said. I looked at her. What? You used to, she said, when you did dishes. I listened. The water ran. Plates clinked. No sound from me. I guess I stopped, I said. She went back to cutting. A few minutes later, she spoke again. Did you get in trouble? She asked. The question was simple. No edge to it. Just curiosity. I don't think so, I said. But something's different, she said. Yes, I said. She nodded once. That was enough. Later that night, after she was asleep, I opened the drawer where I'd put her drawing. I hadn't looked at it since. The paper was creased now, the red lines darker than I remembered. I studied the stick figures. The way she'd drawn herself smaller, closer to me than the others. The officer lying flat. No movement. I realized then that my memory of the event had been shifting. Not changing the facts, but softening the edges. Filing them down so they wouldn't cut. Her drawing hadn't softened at all. The next week, I ran into the officer's wife. I recognized her from the article. She was pushing a stroller outside a cafe near the school. I almost walked past her. She saw me first. You're him? She said. I stopped. My husband, she said. You pulled him out. Yes, I said. She thanked me. Her voice shook. She told me he was recovering, that he asked about me, that he wanted to meet. I didn't answer right away. I don't think that's a good idea, I said finally. She looked surprised. Hurt, maybe. But she nodded. I understand, she said, though I wasn't sure she did. As I walked away, my chest felt tight. Not from guilt, from clarity. Meeting him wouldn't change what had happened. It wouldn't erase the distance that followed. It would only make it harder to carry quietly. That night, my daughter asked who the woman was. Someone connected to the accident, I said. Are you still connected? She asked. I thought about it. Yes, I said. In some ways. She considered that. You don't have to be, she said. I looked at her. What do you mean? You helped, she said. That part's done. She went back to her book. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't explained herself. She had just stated it. Something settled in me then. I had been waiting for permission. From the department. From the city. From someone in uniform. Waiting to be told what the rescue meant. I didn't need that. What mattered was already clear. I had acted because someone needed help, and I could help. Everything after that was noise. The realization didn't bring relief. It brought resolve. The next morning, I requested a meeting with my supervisor. I told him I wanted my old responsibilities back or a clear explanation for the change. He looked uncomfortable. He said it wasn't personal, that things were sensitive right now, that it would be best if I stayed where I was. I won't, I said. The words surprised both of us. I stood up before he could answer. On the walk home, I felt lighter. Not free, but aligned. When I reached the apartment, my daughter was doing homework at the table. She looked up. "You're home early," she said. "Yes," I said. "Is that good?" she asked. "I think so," I said. She smiled. Just a little. That night I hummed while washing the dishes. Not the old tune, a new one. Uneven. Quiet. But mine. The meeting with Human Resources was scheduled for the following week. No one called it disciplinary. No one raised their voice. The language stayed careful, neutral. Words like restructuring and alignment came up more than once. They told me my position was being eliminated. They told me I could apply for another role within the company. They told me they would provide a reference. They did not ask me to reconsider my request. I listened. I nodded. I asked one question about severance. They answered it. We shook hands. It was over in less than 20 minutes. When I stepped outside, the air felt colder than it should have for that time of year. I pulled my jacket tighter and started walking. I didn't have a plan. I just moved. I stopped at the school even though pickup was hours away. The building sat quiet, windows reflecting the street. A janitor pushed a cart near the entrance. I stood there longer than necessary, thinking about routines, how easily they disappear. That afternoon, I told my daughter. We were at the kitchen table. Homework between us. She sensed something before I spoke. "I don't work there anymore," I said. She didn't react right away. "Did they fire you?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Because of the police?" she asked. I considered lying. I didn't. "Partly," I said. She nodded. No tears. No panic. "Will we be okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It might be different, but we'll be okay." She accepted that. She always did. Over the next few days, the cost became practical. I updated resumes, made calls, adjusted budgets. I canceled a weekend activity we'd been planning. She didn't complain. One evening, as we walked home from the store, we passed a patrol car parked near the corner. An officer leaned against it, talking on his radio. He looked at me. This time, he held the look. I didn't look away. Nothing happened. The officer turned back to his call. The moment passed. But it mattered. That night, my daughter said something as we got ready for bed. "You didn't say sorry," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For helping," she said. "You didn't say you were sorry?" "No," I said. "I didn't." She brushed her teeth, thinking. "That's good," she said. She brushed her teeth, thinking. "That's good," she said. "Because you shouldn't be." I didn't answer. I kissed her forehead and turned off the light. Lying in bed later, I thought about what visibility costs, how staying quiet can feel safer, how stepping forward once can follow you longer than you expect. I had lost a job, lost a sense of ease, lost the illusion that doing the right thing would be absorbed cleanly by the world. What I hadn't lost was my place with her. The next morning, I walked her to school like always. At the corner, she stopped and looked up at me. "Dad," she said. "Yes?" "If it happened again," she said, "would you do it?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. She smiled. Not wide. Just enough. Then she turned and walked through the gate. I stood there until the bell rang. Something had been taken from us, that was clear, but something had stayed. And I understood then that the cost wasn't a punishment. It was the price of refusing to disappear. The days slowed after that. Not because there was less to do, but because there was less to rush toward. Mornings still started early. Breakfast still happened at the same table. My daughter still checked the clock while she ate. even though we had more time than before. I walked her to school every day now. No detours for work, no quick goodbyes. At the corner, we paused. Sometimes she talked, sometimes she didn't. The school gate still closed behind her with the same sound. I began spending afternoons at the library, updating applications, reading postings, writing cover letters. I tried not to overthink. I kept my phone face down on the table. When it rang, it was never the call I expected. I adjusted. At home, the apartment felt different. Not emptier, just quieter. I noticed things I hadn't before. The way sunlight reached the far wall in the late afternoon, the soft click the stove made when it cooled, the hum of the building settling at night. One evening, I opened the drawer and took out the drawing again. I unfolded it carefully. The creases stayed. I didn't feel the same tightness I had before. The image no longer surprised me. It simply existed. I put it back and closed the drawer. A week later, we passed the corner again. The new light poles stood straight, the pavement clean. Cars moved through without slowing. My daughter stopped anyway. No one would know, she said. Know what? I asked. That it happened, she said. I looked around. She was right. No, I said. They wouldn't. She thought about that. Then she took my hand and started walking again. We didn't talk about it after that. The officer never contacted me. I didn't contact him. The department didn't reach out again. The letters stopped. The distance held. In a way, that was the change. Before, authority had felt fixed, like something solid you could lean against without thinking. Now it felt like something you moved around, something you didn't assume would hold you up. That knowledge stayed with me. One afternoon, while waiting outside the school, another parent asked if I was looking for work. Yes, I said. He mentioned an opening where he worked. Different field, less pay, flexible hours. I followed up. The interview was brief, practical. They offered me the position the next day. I accepted. The job didn't come with prestige. It came with predictability. It let me pick my daughter up on time. It let me be present without explanation. On my first day, I packed lunch instead of buying it. We ate together at the table before I left. She told me about a test she was nervous about. I listened. That evening, we walked home under a sky turning gray. A patrol car passed us going the other way. It didn't slow. I didn't watch it disappear. At home, my daughter did her homework while I made dinner. I hummed without thinking about it. The tune stayed steady this time. Before bed, she asked if I could read. I did. When I finished, she rolled onto her side and pulled the blanket up. Dad, she said. Yes? I'm glad you were there, she said. Where? I asked. That day, she said. I sat with that for a moment. So am I said. She nodded and closed her eyes. After I turned off the light, I stood in the hallway and listened to her breathing. Even, untroubled. Outside, somewhere far off, a siren passed. It didn't come closer. I went into the kitchen and washed the dishes. I dried them and put them away. The routine held. Not because nothing had changed, but because we had, and that was enough to keep moving forward, quietly, without needing anyone else to name what had happened or what it meant. The corner stayed clean. The city went on. And we did too.